You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansell. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Welcome to the Product Coalition. I'm your host, Jay Stansell. Today we have an extraordinary guest, Pavan Valluri. Pavan's joining us to explore ancient wisdom for modern leadership. Pavan's a passionate student of continuous learning with deep insight into Indian scriptures. So I'm really excited to dive into how these ancient principles can guide CEOs, directors, managers, and even those just starting out in their career in making tough decisions, managing stakeholders, and living a balanced, joyful life that we all strive for. So we're going to be uncovering the secrets to achieving balance and applying these timeless wisdom principles in today's corporate world. Pavan, really excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Hey, Jay. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great opportunity to be in your podcast. It's a really a blessing and a privilege to be on your podcast. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Pavan, to get us going, would you mind giving us an introduction into who is Pavan? Who have we got on the call today?
Okay, me, Pavan, been with corporate world since 24 years of my life. And I've been working as a product head for a couple of organizations, and last 8 years I've been with an organization which is a multinational company spread across 40 countries, and I handle about product management and product engineering for about 70 plus IPs, and I handle the product strategy, business strategy, the business development part of the products too. And way back in my career, I started with my career with financial services. I've been a banker myself. I've been a wealth manager, privileged banking. I was to handle the portfolios of wealth customers. And now I develop products for those people like me earlier.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Now, I've got some hopefully some great questions for you for learning all about this ancient wisdom. But before we get into that, could you just introduce this topic and why this was an important podcast episode for you?
The topic Indian knowledge system has been in mind since last probably 10-15 years for me now. So I see many of the people who are very successful, be it like Steve Jobs, be it like Bill Gates, be it like Mark Zuckerberg. They keep coming to talking about what they have learned from India, when they visited India, when they've been with a few great people, what they learned and all. So I was very intrigued understanding how these both worlds together meet, and this is like very intriguing to me, and I was trying to understand because I personally grew up in a family where we used to do a lot of rituals, and I didn't find any difference or any link between these two. But when I started understanding more deeper Indian knowledge system, I started reading the scriptures. I got a guidance from a spiritual guru. I realized that there are many aspects which I have learned from him and the scriptures that I can use it in my corporate life in the last 10 years. And I've seen it myself where I can actually apply them so easily. And I could see the same thing being reflected by many of the people who are successful. And I realized, I think it makes sense for us to learn from it and probably share it with everybody.
Fantastic. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to getting into this. Most topics I've normally got at least 1 foot in the topic and can talk to it in a sense. But today, all around Indian knowledge systems, all around these awesome pieces of wisdom that have stood the test of time. I'm really excited to get going. So, first question for you, Pavan, is what is the Indian knowledge system all about?
Okay, so Indian knowledge system is actually a multiple sources of knowledge, and it's been gathered across by seers. We call them seers because they can see beyond what is visible straight onto the straight eyes. So this is covered by many of the seers, and there is no single source of truth. That's the beauty of it. But there are various ways the truth is explained. So the best part is it's diverse. Now we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, but the entire Indian knowledge system has diverse views, but talking about the same truth. It actually gives you the guidelines to have a wonderful growth-oriented society. That's is a major difference in when you look at any of the practices which it is there. The aspect which comes out is growth, and anything which is sustainable and growth, they call it Dharma, 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 which is predominantly known in the world as Indian knowledge system. Now, this is based on multiple truths which is explained. So that's where it's called Indian knowledge system, or most famous known as Sanatana Dharma. So the eternal truth, which we can call it.
Okay. So to just recap for me, I want to keep up with you in this session. So Dharma is sustainable growth for a society, and that's an example of the Indian knowledge system in effect. Okay, so give me an example then, Pavan. How can someone learn from this system and apply it in corporate or even startup world, no matter where they may be?
Sure.
Maybe it's an executive that is struggling with balance right now, or maybe it's a junior level employee who's in their first 3 months, first steps in their career, and maybe feeling a little bit overwhelmed. What are some of the examples you can give?
Sure. So I think more importantly, I'll take the major scriptures which are there. I might not be able to quote all of them. It's a list. So we call it a library of scriptures. So we can pick any of the book and we can learn a lot from them. So I'll take a few very important books, or probably popular known books. One is Bhagavad Gita, which is the conversation between an Arjuna and Krishna, who are the main characters of that particular epic called Mahabharata. And we also have different knowledge systems which we can talk about, like the Pramanas. When the Pramanas means the means of knowledge. So let's say, for example, we are going through a situation. Let it be a senior exec, like a CXO level, who is going through a situation where she or he is actually looking at understanding a situation, and how do I react to it? So how do you look at it, a particular situation? In Indian scriptures, they actually quote about Pramanas. So there are 6 ways you need to look at it to understand whether it is truth or not. So you got a lot of analysis, right? When AI, when we actually do, we gather multiple data, it picks out the patterns of these 6 and actually comes out with an output saying, this is a possible truth because based on what I have understood. So in Indian knowledge system, these Pramanas are called 6 of them. One is Pratyaksha, which is the knowledge of perception, where I see, where I clearly understand, I heard, and I with the senses which I lead it. And second one is inference, where you actually infer, basically logical reasoning. You might not see it, but you have to do a reasoning. Okay, if this happened, possibly this would have happened. That's the inference which you pick it up. Analogy, it can be upamana, where you actually say, okay, this is what a knowledge gained through comparison when you pick it up an analogy. And there is a presumption because this would have happened, derivation, which we actually do. Like that, we have non-perception and shabda, which is testimony. With this 6 pramanas, you understand what you have to take a decision. And this is where we go back to our famous quote, or famous chapter of Mahabharata, which is Bhagavad Gita, and where Arjuna, he was in the middle of a war. In front of them, there were roughly around 20 or 2 million soldiers, and he has about 1 million soldiers behind him. He was in between all of them, about 3 to 4 million people ready to fight for a piece of lands. You can call it that way. And he was little overwhelmed by looking at all of them, and he's confused. He's saying, oh my God, I can't do this. That's where Krishna actually gives the bigger objective. So that's where we talk about the end justify the means, right? So Krishna explained Arjuna the bigger objective. Anywhere we look at a CXO level things, we always look at people who are just joined, or people who look at that decision and like, hey, I think that doesn't sound rational. That doesn't sound logical. But at a CXO level, we need to understand the bigger objective, even though we are facing a lot of difficulties which you are looking at. And that's where this conversation between Arjuna and Krishna is a classic example where how one can be very attentive and ask and seek help. That's what Arjuna does. He just didn't say, okay, I quit and I go, but he said, okay, let me ask. So these are the quick things which understanding these things will work out. We call it the Pramanas and the Itihasas. If Itihasa is thus happened, so we in Indian knowledge system believe that the conversation really happened, and the conversation, and I personally stand out as an example. If there is any issue which it's bogging out, I'm gonna have to take a decision. I open a random page, and believe it or not, you get the answer. And people make fun of it. Hey, come on, that's impossible to do it. And I tried twice, and I said, okay, it might be my psych which I got into, so that's why it's working. So one day I got to my daughter and said, she was a little worried. She's in teens, and she thought, okay, I'm going through a certain issue. Dad, I said, okay, this book has an answer. She said, you must be kidding me. It's impossible. I said, you don't have to believe it. Just try it out. And you'll definitely have to believe it. She picked up, she got the scripture. She said, what does it mean? I explained her, what does it mean? I don't know what situation she's in, because obviously we can't ask as teens. She understood that, and she said, wow, this book is a magic book. And that's Bhagavad Gita for you.
Nice. Nice. What I really enjoyed about what you've shared there is that these are much like other artifacts we have in business and other knowledge resources we turn to when we're looking at, for instance, frameworks or repeatable strategies, scalable strategies, and things that other people have done that have been proven to work to create a positive change. I think that the next question I've got for you is we often see people, colleagues that we either work with or from vendors we're meeting with, and we come across these people sometimes who are incredibly calm and relaxed, but sometimes in incredibly powerful positions, and with huge amounts of accountability that sits on their shoulders alone. I think the thought that goes through my mind quite often is that nature or nurture? Has the person learned how to be so calm and cool and logical and rational when the world feels like it's on fire, or have they learned that from someone? So before we just go through the next questions, I'm just keen to get, what's your thoughts on when you meet those type of people, Pat?
So I again go back to the scriptures, and so similar to the 6 Pramanas of truth, what you look at, there are 6 ways you can understand the psyche of a person, or a psyche of what you need to behave, right? As you rightly said, the framework is most important. What actually the Indian knowledge system talks about is not a boxed guideline, a boxed rule. For example, if I give you a rule book, for example, Jay, and say, okay, this worked for me, X organization, it worked for me, and you say wonderful, and you apply it, it didn't work. And you're like, Pavan, what did you give me? It didn't work very much. I said, you have to follow 1, 2, 3, 4. No, Pavan, I'm in a different country. It doesn't work there. So how does a rule book work to me? So what the designers, if I can call them as the seers or sages who decided, was they gave a framework of guidelines. They said, this is not a rule book. This is a framework. And I'm proud and blessed to be in an organization. We have a management framework in our organization. And the best part is, every year we go back, all the exec stakeholders, about thousands of them, vice president and above, we sit and discuss each one of them and say, do you have to change this? Is the world changed? Are our stakeholders changed? Does it make sense to have this kind of framework? These things work, and we change. And exactly it matches with what our seer said, that if the one rule which you've got is not applicable now, it might be applicable 5,000 years old. Probably it was written 1,000,000 years old. So, but you come back to now and say, okay, what are the changes I need to make for this rule as per today? Now, today we are talking, both of us, very far away in the world. Probably they were not talking at this time. So they said, okay, you can't cross sea. 7 seas is a rule which I have put, that you can't cross the sea, because if you cross the sea, there is some issue. Now that might be that time. Now, if I go back to my framework, it says, no, it's not applicable right now. So please take it off. So we take it off. We just move it out of the rule book or a framework. Now that's the thing which a CXO should have. We need to have a guideline. You cannot run an organization without having a great framework, which I observed in my organization right now. But the beauty of it is, you should be flexible enough to change it whenever the time demands or the space demands. Now, the most important thing which it comes is this particular thing is called darshanas. Okay, Darshana, darshana, which actually means view, right? Darshana in Sanskrit, in English means view. So we have 6 types of views in the Indian knowledge system. One of them is Nyaya, which is like helps critical thinking, logical decision making, and structured problem solving. It's a university on it. You can actually do a PhD based on that. And there is Vaiseshika. It talks about innovation. It talks about making complex problems into their fundamental parts. And there is third one, which is Sankhya. I might be throwing a lot of words at you, but these are all imbibed in the knowledge system which we grew up with. Now, when I understand the Samkhya, for example, it teaches about balance and it focusing on both material success and employee well-being. It explains in that philosophy. And the fourth one is the most famous one you might all know is yoga. When you say yoga, we look at the physical being, right? It's one part of the yoga. There
Right.
are other part of yoga which talks about mindfulness, clarity, and then we have other Mimamsa and Vedanta, which explains you the discussions which we are having. A podcast comes under a Mimamsa. You have a question, I have an answer. I have a question, you might have an answer. So when you grow through all these things, when you face through a situation, I, as a person, would know how to react. And that's where you see a calmness in a person, which all these are imbibed in the behavioral upbringing of a person. That's how an IKS known person or IKS following person can easily do it.
Awesome. Awesome.
Sorry for a long answer.
No, I really appreciate it. This is just fascinating, Pavan. I think my next question is then about like learning the basics. So people tune into this as a live event or listening back as a podcast. They've got an hour free in their diary coming up on a Friday afternoon. How does one learn the basics of Indian knowledge system? Where would you start if you're someone like me?
So I would say it should start with a basics of taking a Bhagavad Gita in a pretty normal version. The first thing you need to have is a guru, which is difficult to find. So let's start with a person who can coach you, who can understand the IKS in the way which you can apply it. Now, somebody can give you a shloka, which is very important if you have to learn it. It's like a theory which you learn, right, which is very important. But you should have somebody who can apply it, the essence of understanding this sloka, and how can you apply it to your daily life. That's what a guru does. And you might say, hey Pavan, I can't find a guru now, it's so difficult, we don't know who is who and what level they are looking at and all stuff. Now when we go ahead, the basic thing which you can read is Mahabharata. That's a 10-volume book which comes in, and there are abridged versions of that, and there are versions which have taken out the essence to the corporate world. I can suggest the books if somebody can ping me on LinkedIn. The books which actually have picked up the essence of the Mahabharata. Now they'll tell you one character, and I think you can, anybody who can remember that and Google it and find out that is Vidura, Vidhura, Vidura, who is the brother of the main character in Mahabharata. That person has given a rule book, literally a guideline, because there's a conversation happening between a king and him. He says, how does one king should be? And the conversation starts like a king should have 6 ministers with this characteristics. A king should have employ this people under these offices. You will get all the guidelines there. And more simplest, if you can ask me, little further, you can pick up a Chanakya Niti. Chanakya is a person who is the author of our modern Arthashastra, we call it, economics or finances. He has given beautiful administrative economic policies, which I am reading it, started reading it now, and I realize he has given immense essence of what you can do as an administrator, as a CEO, as a manager, as a leader. Now I've been hearing a lot of things about a manager and a leader, a difference between one who can do it. And when I was reading that book, I'm like, oh, this is all written here. Oh, this is the character which he wants us to do. A simple example I'll tell you. He says, when you actually know the secrets of your team members, secrets of your team members, the team members might work with you more better way, efficiently.
Okay.
So I was like, doesn't make sense to me. But if you look at it, the and he also says you need to also share some secrets with the team so that you are self observant, saying, okay, I need to be careful now. But also he says you need to share the right secrets. You can't make, because you are at a leader space. And a beautiful word he says, and that's, I keep on quoting, that is, a leader should be 4 steps ahead of the team. They should be able to listen to that, what they're actually the team is saying, because they can't be away some 60 feet away, hierarchy wise 60 levels away. They should be around 4 levels away. At the same time, they should show the direction, or else team can get confused. So this is all is written in Chanakya, who was around 500 BC. He is a real person who wrote the Arthashastra, and it's a Maurya kingdom around 500 BC. That's how we got
Fantastic.
the Arthashastra coming to us.
There's so much that you shared there that where I'm just seeing connections to modern management leadership principles. Things like making yourself vulnerable as a leader. Show that you're willing to be vulnerable in front of your team, and your team will share their vulnerabilities as well. And through those shared vulnerabilities, you find and develop trust.
Right.
And combine that with concepts like psychological safety, and
Yes.
ensuring the team feels safe with each other, being able to express vulnerabilities. I completely see the connections now between what you're talking about in the scriptures and what we read and hear in modern management. So this is fantastic. Let's move on then, Pavan, to a lot of this so far has been around theory, getting started, finding, again, the guru in a Western concept, I'd say is like a coach around this piece. But now let's go into behaviors. How does one behave in a way that they are demonstrating these learnings, and how do they monitor and regulate themselves to ensure that they are participating in all corners of life, personal, professional, and finding that balance that everyone seeks to find in an ongoing way? What are the behaviors that need to either change or you need to pay attention to get started?
So I again go back to the 4 major principles, or we call it ashramas, which is the stages of life, okay, or where we behave, or the 3 components of life which a person has to go up to. A person should look up for dharma, which is what we are talking about, the righteousness or the just things which you need to do. And second is artha, which is the desires, wealth and material pursuits. Sorry, not the desires. Artha is wealth and material pursuits which you need to look at. And kama. Kama is the desires and personal satisfaction. So Indian knowledge system, most possibly the perception people have is, oh, it's all about running away. It's all about renunciation. You move away from your life. That's sannyasa. That's a stage of sages or monastic life. It is only very, I would say, 15% of it is monastic life. 60 to 70% of the instructions given in the scriptures are for I would say, a common life, like person whom I'm living. I have a family, I have my parents, I have my sisters, brother-in-law, I have my relatives, I have my office, I have my colleagues, I have my society, and I have God. So if you look at it, if this person is called grihastha, which is a person who is like any one of them, normal living life of these things. Now these 3 major things which I was talking about, dharma, artha, kama, these are the 3 areas of life when the behavior should be, I need to be following these principles of these things. Now what are the things which you go deeper? Now artha, when you say wealth, the right to wealth which you need to get in. You can gamble. I can say I can gamble and go to a casino and can become rich or a poor in a single point of time. But it talks about what kind of wealth you need to achieve, aspire. You can aspire wealth. It's not that, oh, it's material world, you should not. No. You can aspire wealth so that you can sustain yourself, your family. You should take care of your family, and society. If that kind of wealth, which can actually you will use it for sustaining these three components, is the most important wealth you need to a behavior you should look at. So it's not wrong to be wanting that, hey, I need to be rich. Rich is allowed, wealth is allowed. That's why we have a goddess of wealth, Aishwarya, we call it Aishwarya Lakshmi. So wealth is being preyed upon, so it is allowed for you to be wealthy. Think about being wealthy, but with a caveat saying you should earn wealth for yourself, your family, your society. These are the three components. Now, coming back to the main karma, what kind of desires you should have? Desires which are again sustainable growth. So, can I have a desire which says, okay, I need a car? Okay, what do you need the car for? No, I need to drive faster. No, that's not sustainable. That's not giving you growth. No, I need to go to places where I can go and work. And because of that, I'm giving something more. So look at the objective. Going back to the first statement which I made, the first important thing in Dharma or Indian knowledge system talks about is is your final objective growth. So when I'm doing this podcast, why am I doing this podcast for? My objective is if 10 people out of the 11,000 people who are listening pick up a book and read it and they change their way of thinking or it helps them to grow, my objective is done. That's how my objective is. So these are the dharma, artha, kama, which lives at. But final, there is one more option called moksha. That's not for us, you and me, because we are in the family life. We are in the grihastha because we are not into renunciation yet. That's monastic life. These three does not follow into those three. So they have clear instructions that a monastic life will only talk about moksha, which is salvation or liberation, whereas a grihastha life should only talk about these three. I cannot say I want to be liberated. I can't run away. Not allowed. So these are the behaviors which you look into, and more importantly, the balance which I was talking. I spoke about 5 main components. So what my guru, the spiritual, you can call it as a mentor or a coach, talks about is a balance. So I'm sure you would have seen about portfolio rebalancing in a wealth management. You have some stocks, you have something, and you invest, and every quarter you go and check, hey, did I, as a model portfolio, am I there? Have I deviated? Our guru coach talks about the 5 principles and 5 components of your life. First is yourself. You are very important. So you need to understand, you need to invest on yourself, be it wealth, time, and effort. And similarly, second is your family, your kids, your wife, your parent, your spouse, anybody, your partner. Third is your pitris, we call it, or the forefathers, your siblings, your parents, and how do we put our time and effort to them. And the fourth is society. How are you contributing to the society? Are you giving charity? Are you giving efforts and time and probably wealth to the nearby the society which you are living in? And the fifth one is God. Now look at the entire Indian knowledge system talks about. We'd see, oh, it's all about talking about God or something. Only 20% is given to the God. Your time, effort, and wealth. Because the minute you have a balance amongst all these 5, your thought process would be, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing a job for good. So when I go on a Monday morning, I don't have this Monday blues because I know it's for me. 20% is for me. 20% is for my family. Oh my goodness, I should go to the job. And that's what helps me to be motivated, to be going forward. That's where the behavior, if you look at it, if you can check the balances, I'll tell you a simple way to do it, Jay, and anybody can follow it. Take out a paper. For a week, you check where are you spending your time, effort, and wealth.
Okay.
These 5 components. You'll see that you might be unbalanced or imbalanced in one of these components, and that might be leading to a stress. You will not know it, but you'll observe it suddenly. Oh, 4 components in my 24 hours, I'm not spending anything on me. I'm for my family, I'm for my society, I'm for God. And I'm not spending anything on me. I'm not learning. I'm not buying anything. I'm not spending time to enjoy myself. Oh my God. Then you know that's a stress you're going through. So get out some point, take out some portion from each one of them, give yourself a time. Or it might be other way around. Only me, 100% me, selfish. you will be suffering because you will not have relations. Your network feels sad, talk to you. That is where you can actually start looking at these behaviors of the balance.
Wow, this is awesome piece of advice coming into this, Pavan, because when I think about me throughout my professional life and personal life, thinking across those dimensions that you've shared, um, has it been 20%? There's definitely times when I look back, for many of us in our early 20s, when it's 80% about me and what can I get out of the world. And we go for weeks or months without talking to our parents or our grandparents as we're either focused on our social lives or our career lives. And then there's the flip side of it. When I think back to having my daughter almost 10 years ago, when it's all about being a dad, being there for the family, and as a father, cutting almost no time out for myself. It was all around my daughter and my wife and playing the supporting role. And to do that supporting role really well, I needed to bring in wealth, which meant pretty much it was probably 45% family, 45% career, and whatever was left was for me maybe. So I really like the structure you've given. I like the fact that you've given an activity there for
Right.
people to take away, to assess and reflect. And like any moment of reflection, there's always something to be learned in it. So thank you so much. I think that the last question I've really got for you here, Pavan, is how did you speak so confidently with such wisdom and confidence around the knowledge, the scriptures, the wisdom, the examples. But where did this journey start for you?
So the journey started with one meditation session I attended about 10 years back, where I've met the guru. And when I had this prejudged or notion that, oh, okay, a sage or seer who is in monastic life would be like speaking in local language, and he might not understand my corporate thing which I get in. But when I met him, the first time when I met him, he was so sweet, and actually it was a brilliant experience, and probably I can explain it in a probably couple of hours. But coming back to what he is for me is, I can explain the situation and he can pick out a verse from any of the scriptures. He can pick up from Purana, he can pick up from the Vedas, and he can tell you, okay, you know what, there is a story which happened and this is exactly what the situation you are in, and this is how it works. Why don't you do that? And I started getting, okay, I need to learn this. Then he said, no, no, no. Puranas and Vedas are not for you because you are leading a Grahastha life. So start with Mahabharata, start with Bhagavad Gita. So he gave me those scriptures. And the main thing, which is again a principle of Indian knowledge system, is three important principles, which is Shravanam in Sanskrit, actually means listening. So I started listening more to others, not only to my the coach, but to everybody who's talking to me, who's giving me feedback. I never used to was able to take a feedback about 10, 15 years back. I used to be like, this don't guys don't understand me. I'm like, I'm superhero already. I realized I was not listening. So the first thing he corrected me was Shravanam, which is listen. Keep listening. Then I said, okay, corrected. Then we call agile way, which is called mananam. Why I got agile? Because agile is like you take small sprints and start doing it, improve it. Like mananam is reflection. I listened and I reflected. And when I reflect, I actually keep on going back to what I did, but at the same time, what I have to do in future. So that's contemplation. So Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. These are the three major principles of IKs again. I've told you many major, but yeah, these are all components which I pick up a book, I get these principles. So Shravanam is listening, Mananam is reflection, third is Nididhyasanam, which is contemplation. So I contemplate with him, I contemplate with my family, I contemplate with my spouse, my wife, I contemplate sometimes with my kid. She's around, I told you, teen. So I go back to her and say, if this is what you told me that I'm not understanding you, can you explain me how? So I listen, I contemplate and check, is it right what she says for her in right now? And then I explain her, this is what it is. And she says, oh yeah, you're listening, you're learning, probably I'll have to listen from you. So these are the behaviors which I learned and started executing last 10 years. And here I am where I have read the Mahabharata. I'll tell you why I said read. It's a 10-volume book, each volume running about 600 pages, 6,000 pages. I've read about 75% of it right now. I teach about 120 plus youth. When I say youth, 18 years to about 30 years aged people in different parts of their life, doing entrepreneurship, doing their corporate work, doing their middle management. I teach them the Bhagavad Gita, the lessons of Dharma, how can they apply, what they can do, different practices which we can do. And I learn from them. That's the best part. So I keep telling them that I learn more from them because they come from different aspects of life. And they come and tell, this is what I observed, Pavan. I don't think this works. Oh, okay, let me go back. Learn it again. Check with my Gurudev, contemplate with him, understand it, and come back and situations and help. So that's what my journey was, how I executed that and started learning, Jay.
Fantastic, fantastic. I mean, to use product language around all of this, Pavan, I'm hearing there's different products. Within these products, there's different features, and it's about finding the right feature for the right problem to solve that problem. There was something you said a few moments ago around contemplation I'd like to touch on. In a fast-moving world with business executives looking and quite often needing to make decisions rapidly, contemplation is something, and I can talk about this personally, for me, is a step that is easily skipped because you feel the need to get to your decision based around what you've heard. And that moment of contemplation might only be a few seconds because you're in a meeting and you feel like the expectations are give us the answer before we finish the meeting. What advice would you give to people in that situation where they don't sleep on things? You know, they feel like I've got to solve this today, I've got to get that email sent, or I've got to respond to that Slack or Teams message, when actually the outcome will be better if they give it time and use that time for further contemplation. How do you ensure you're contemplating decisions properly before you're executing, and especially with teenagers?
So that's a great question. And I would say, I take an example of, let's say, Roger Federer, who's playing tennis. Does he play only on the game when he plays? Or take an example of Sachin Tendulkar, the cricket, because we are from India. I love cricket, and he's god of the cricket, we call it. He will not go directly into a match. There is a lot of practice which is happening. So the contemplation practice should be a daily thing, which I would say. I started with weekly. It's very difficult. You're right. I'll not get time. So in last 8 years, I started with the weekly. Every week, Sunday, I put calendar request to myself and saying, okay, 15 minutes contemplation. What did I do in my last 1 week? Have I applied the 6 principles which I talked about? Am I in balance, which I talked about? So I looked at that. And then I started doing daily 5 minutes. End of the day or morning of the day, I wake up and say, it's like a stand-up call, which we call in agile world. I stand up and say, okay, these are the things which I'm going to face today. These are the things which I do. Okay, I'll work out. Oh, this is what I did. I should have done it this way. That became 5 minutes morning, 5 minutes evening, a daily. It slowly, when you started practicing, it will be so beautifully ingrained in your mind that a Federer facing the spin or a pace, or a Tendulkar facing a bouncer or a off spin, he exactly knows how to play it. And when you actually, the contemplation mind, AI, people actually say AI learns very fast. I'll tell you, the neural elasticity of our mind is so fast that if you're been contemplating so good and listening, contemplating, your reaction time is milliseconds. It just flows it. And that's why you see successful people doing it.
Nice.
And you'll be shocked to see, okay, how well they worded it. Oh, that was too superb question. They just turned it into their favor. Now that, because your mind is continuously getting used to it. It will take time. It will not be today suddenly I woke up and say I became a very excellent person in contemplation. No, it took me 7 years. It might take you 7 months, Jay, because you are different than me. Your learning capability might be different than me. Your practices might be different than me. But everybody can do it. And when you keep on practicing, and I do that to tell all my mentees, it might be, this might be, oh, I can't probably, if this is your change, start with this, it'll become this much, and your reaction time will be this much. And when it's this much, people will like, oh my God, how do you do that? And that's where you can go back and say, IKS, Indian knowledge system, is the reason why I am doing it here. That's exactly what we are told in IKS, that practice. Sadhana, we call it in Sanskrit, practice. What is the practice you're doing? I would say that.
I love it. You've made it really clear. Thank you so much. I think the analogy in the future, though, Pavan, a little bit more Joe Root or Ben Stokes in the cricket analogy, that would go down much better.
Sure, yeah.
But no, all good. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Pavan. This has been an absolute pleasure of a session for me. To be honest, coming into this, I was really worried I was going to come across as ignorant, as I know so little about this space. But actually, 45 minutes in, you've made this really clear for me, helped me have some clarity. I've certainly gained some new knowledge from this and some new perspectives. And to be honest, it's sessions like this is to why I love doing these podcast recordings, because I get to meet so many awesome people from around the world with completely new experiences for me and hopefully the audience to take away. So thank you very much, Pavan.
Thank you, Jay. I should actually say thanks, because you are very, very open to learn. That's where, when you saw this topic, which is probably not the typical topic which you get on product. I am a product manager, been with product management since last 15 to 20 years. You could have asked me questions. I could have spoken about that. But I thought, okay, let me try and explain this great knowledge, treasure of knowledge which is there. And I'm very happy to see that you accepted it with such an enthusiasm. The learning, that's what spiked me. Okay, if somebody is willing to learn, that's what I am. I'm willing to learn every day. So that's what I do. So when I saw that enthusiasm, I'm very happy to be here. It's a blessing, I would say, to share the things which I have been learning and I'm still learning, to share it with all your audience. And again, as I said, if 5 to 6 people even learn it and they start doing it, I'll be blessed to be part of that channel, for me being the catalyst of their growth. And again, growth is what Dharma is. So that's what I would do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pavan. Well, on that note, if there's anyone else around the world who's got extremely unique views and are in product or business, please check out productcoalition.com to learn how to join me on the podcast. For now, that's all for today. Thanks very much, Pavan. Thank you, everyone, for giving us your time listening or watching. And I look forward to sharing another awesome Product Coalition session with everyone another time. Thank you.
Thank you.
For today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansell, got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.